Okay, hello everyone. May 2020, I wanted to do this video, sort of a summary again, but a little bit different, because as we get new information about all the evidence coming in with these recent disclosures by Grinnell, the ODNI, and hopefully that Johnny, our man Johnny Radcliffe, keeps the declassifications coming. Right from the very beginning of our story, we focus on declassifications. What would be the two easiest documents to declassify to take down the deep state? So with every new ODNI, with every new person, Trump, etc., we keep recommending what to declassify. So, but let me tell you why I got into this and what I felt I could add to the discussion, because a lot of people are coming to this and they forget where I came from, the IT business and also software business, and where I really felt I could add to the effort was in the area of network analysis. I was doing network analysis when a very rude McAfee bought our company and changed the name to Network Associates, and they brought in all these Russian hackers to write viruses, and we became basically an extortion outfit, and we were treated like slaves, basically, the Network Associates and Network General folks. And they brought in Dmitry Alperovitch, the same guy who does the encrypted blackberries, and I'm going to explain why I thought the blackberries were important when I found out that Dmitry Alperovitch later had moved on from this kind of extortion racket, writing viruses at the end of every quarter, to then writing antivirus fixes, really holding CFOs hostage and the department heads of accounting hostage at the end of every month. When I found out he was the person that was involved in CrowdStrike, when I found out he was the person that was involved with the DNC hoax, that it wasn't the DNC Russians that hacked it, it was Trump's Russians. Trump had a spy ring of Russians. When I had seen Dmitry every day writing viruses with 12 guys from Moscow, who that's all they did in the Soviet Union, I laughed. I said, this is the biggest hoax of all time, and I can add something to this discussion. I know right where to go. It's the devices that Dmitry configures. Excuse me for 1 second. Excuse me. So it's the devices Dmitry configures. That's going to tell more truth than anything. It's going to be the servers and the blackberries. So now people are putting forward this idea that the blackberries are conspiracy theory. The blackberries are conspiracy theory. The blackberries are somehow not involved. The blackberries weren't involved in Libya. They weren't involved in Syria. They weren't involved in Sudan. They weren't involved in negotiating the Iran nuclear deal. Hillary didn't have a BlackBerry. Obama didn't have a BlackBerry. Biden didn't have a BlackBerry. Biden's son didn't have a BlackBerry. They weren't using BlackBerries at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. They weren't using BlackBerries as the key communication vehicle between the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and the Senate. They weren't using BlackBerries by the underlings of Joe Biden and John Kerry, guys like Jonathan Weiner, who were the key negotiators for Ukraine managing these weapons. They weren't using BlackBerries at all. Now people are trying to erase BlackBerries from history. Well, let me tell you something. I followed Clinton Cash, Peter Schweitzer, as far as I could. And the things he said about this DTRA, this Defense Threat Reduction Agency, managing nuclear. They're sort of like the hand that manages the chess pieces, the nuclear chess pieces. Hey, Kevin, how are you? Great to see Kevin in Columbus there. So they also manage the chemical weapons and biological weapons, which makes it important to talk about it still today. If we're talking about someone effecting a biological attack on the United States, it's still important to talk about the blackberries. I went to look at the DTRA's website, and I saw they used blackberries at the time of Libya, Syria, when all these things were happening. Remember, Gaddafi had weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Since then, I've interviewed people in the Secret Service, and I've got witnesses to it, although they probably won't come forward. But a Secret Service agent I interviewed named Ray, who told me straight to my face, that Condoleezza Rice would talk directly to Putin. Condoleezza Rice talked directly to Putin in Russian on the BlackBerry. So I know there was communications between our State Department. May have been Yeltsin. I made a film, and I can't remember, so I go back to that. But whoever Condoleezza Rice was talking to, I thought it was Putin. Putin was, there was Medvedev for a little while, but then it was Putin again. But this is the first Medvedev. He's talking directly, so I know there's communications between the U.S. State Department on some BlackBerry and the Russians. And I know the intermediary is Dmitry Alperovich, so I know the BlackBerries are going to be the fundamental thing to solving the network. That's the key. So if you don't have that same background, if you don't have that same context of IT, it doesn't matter. I can prove it to you, the BlackBerries, the significance of the BlackBerries without that. So that's what I want to do today. Is the first picture I want you to think about is Hillary Clinton in the airplane, looking at her BlackBerry, texting away, and I think she's at the tarmac while the Libya invasion is going on. But she's looking down at her BlackBerry, and everyone probably remembers that picture. That's proof that she used a BlackBerry. Now, everybody probably also remembers the fact she wouldn't use an NSA-approved BlackBerry, so that this was a private, encrypted, like she had a private server connected to this BlackBerry. Making that very important. Following the BlackBerries is very important right from the get-go with Hillary Clinton. I couldn't go any farther with Clinton Cash. I read the book. I socialized the book. I went over it with my audience every day. I also read Peter Dale Scott, Money, Drugs, and Oil. I couldn't go any farther than that. I talked to Cy Hirsch. I asked him what he would recommend. He said, either write a book or go on the road and gather the news yourself. I went on the road. When we had found out that the key person that seemed to be managing all these BlackBerries was Huma Abedin. Now I ask you all to think about another picture of, you remember pictures of Huma Abedin with a BlackBerry. Did she seem like she was the vice chairman at any point for the DNC? Would she be close to the story? Do you remember a guy by the name of Anthony Weiner who had a BlackBerry and called himself a crackhead or crackberry? They called themselves crackberries, right? Because they were on the BlackBerry so much so that he gave everyone on his staff BlackBerries. Rahm Emanuel, you remember him having a BlackBerry? Yes, I think I do. So Obama had a watered down BlackBerry. All the staff around Obama had BlackBerries, if you remember. John Podesta wrote a big article in the New York Times about how it's Obama's connection with America, his soul, with connection with America's soul. Podesta had a BlackBerry, and his brother had a BlackBerry. It's the network. It's the network. Why is the network and the metadata, another term I said a lot in the early days, so important? Because it doesn't matter what the testimony and the fake stories and the fake narratives that you're given. The BlackBerry actually tells you who's communicating with who. Tells you who's communicating with who. I saw news articles come out and pictures come out in February of 2017 with this Imran Awan, who's in Pakistan making $160,000 a year, and his three brothers that are all seem to be making that amount of money, or else his three alter egos that he created on paper in the PeopleSoft system. And then there's this another guy, Omar, who's in charge of BlackBerries. And I see a picture of of Imran Awan with Bill Clinton. And it's not one of those campaign pictures. If any closer, they'd be kissing each other. So I know that this is an important guy. I also see an email from WikiLeaks saying how Imran, from Nancy Pelosi, saying, Imran, get in here, no staff. To me, that's really important. She's the Speaker of the House. If something's going on these BlackBerries, that's really, really important. The BlackBerries are not unimportant, okay? Debbie Wasserman Schultz also has a BlackBerry. And they're different DNC emails. So if they were trying to find her iPad, and the only person who knows anything about the password is Imran Awan, again, the guy who's configuring the BlackBerries. So being an IT guy, everybody goes at the problem from their own angle. We need to have a cooperative effort where I go at it from an IT point of view. Charles Ortel comes at it from a financial point of view. Other people come at it from different points of view. It doesn't matter. doesn't. It's not. It's a false choice to say it's got to be one or got to be the other. It's a false choice. So, I sat through the Benghazi trial. I looked at all the DSS, all the diplomatic Secret Service guys that were security service guys that were there. They were all carrying blackberries. They were all talking about bringing these Muslim Brotherhood guys over from Egypt. I don't know if George Papadopoulos is involved on coming in from that side or not. Like Carter Page came in from the other side of Libya, from the Tunisia side, but we'll leave that to another day. I don't know if they carried blackberries or not. But the Christopher Stevens had the blackberry before his death. So there's a lot of blackberry involved here. I'm not a particular fan of it. I'd gone to a couple of conferences when they first came out and they were dominating messaging. But I learned about it. After I went on the road. I went to a place where Muzaffar Awan, who was connected to the Awans through real estate in the DC area, had all these pain clinics, and they seemed to be all these fake doctors. And from there, I went to Waterloo. I got a filmmaker met me, and we went to Toronto and then Montreal, going around to these different properties that the Awans had, and they all seem to be kind of mail-in pharmacies, Canada pharmacies. Again, seemed to be the drug business. Okay, so it just seemed like there was nefarious purposes. Later, we found out the person that was appointed by Nancy Pelosi, the Inspector General, also said it was for nefarious purposes. To me, that's really important references to say the blackberries are important. Okay, so I went on the road trying to find Imran's blackberries. The filmmaker in Montreal had said that her boyfriend had become a U.S. citizen after having a background potentially with ISI. Not only a visa, but had used the New York Film Scholarships to get into becoming a U.S. citizen. I figured this is an intelligence operation. I'm going to find these blackberries. It's going to be an intelligence operation. They're using these blackberries for the encrypted communication. Okay, so I went to New York. I went to all the places that are famous now. I went to, obviously, the Clinton Foundation and went to SEIU, the bank, where I felt that they were laundering the money. I went to where Huma lived. I went to where Anthony Weiner's apartment was on 23rd Street. It was right by Eric Braverman, the guy running the Clinton Foundation. It was right across the street from where Chelsea lived. There was Tony Podesta's house right over there. There was John Podesta's house right over there. They all could meet right there in Madison Square Park. I did a whole bunch of shows from there. I just had to get it in my mind what the network looked like and how it was all centered around this little park. So I then went to DC. I think people may remember me going to walk the last steps of Seth Rich, but I also met this guy who was configuring blackberries for Joe Biden. He said he had been with Joe Biden for 30 years in the U.S. Senate. He still seemed to have a relationship with him now that even though Joe Biden was no longer vice president. So he looked an awful lot like Bill Taylor, maybe a little bit younger. The same Bill Taylor was trying to overthrow Trump with the coup, which coup? Trying to overthrow Trump with the impeachment coup. Looked like Bill Taylor, a little bit younger, maybe blacker hair. I thought, well, maybe Taylor is aging now that he's, getting in the coup business. It would age me. But anyway, it had the markings. And it didn't just have the U.S. Senate markings. It turned out, we looked up the number, it mapped to a military guy who was in charge, a guy named Gonter, who was in charge of military intelligence of informants on Capitol Hill. DIA handler for people like Imran Awan. I mean, and also pointing to Fort Belvoir, but also it mapped to this thing called the SCC. There's a lot of different possible definitions. It could be secure communications that was on Capitol Hill, that does the secure communications on Capitol Hill. It also could be the SCC for WMD. SCC WMD was the sort of the hotline that was put in after these exercises that were done at National Defense University if there was ever a suitcase bomb in America. And there was called The exercises were those called the Wild Atom exercises in 2001, 2002. Maybe there was a Wild Atom series before that, actually in 97, 98 as well. But they put in this hotline basically to the White House. And it became this hotline to discuss WMD. And so this is this SCC WMD, and it maps directly to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. This is the same agency that's at Fort Belvoir. So you can see I'm now meeting people from Fort Belvoir saying, you're on the right track, you're on the right track, you're on the right track. Okay? I met one guy who was Defense Threat Logistics Agency located there. He said, you're right on track about the drugs, food and drugs. Heavy on the drugs, light on the food. You're on the right track there. He met me out at Mount Vernon, just up the river here, a little bit on the Potomac, with his 2 kids. I met a doctor twice there who said, drug testing, the thing you're talking about, bioweapons, the thing that we're talking about with Wuhan now? Yes. Met him twice at CPAC. Story never changed. So I had reason to believe that something was going on at Fort Belvoir. So this is why I don't like it when somebody is trying to say, if somebody came out and was trashing Charles Ortel and said, you didn't write that book about GE, oh, you had an insider write it for you, you ghost wrote it, or whatever, was trying to trash Charles Ortel, I'd say, what are you talking about? Charles is an expert. He did all the legwork for that. I'm the same way with the blackberries. I did the legwork. I pounded on 20 different doors all over Virginia and Washington, D.C. to find those blackberries. Okay, that's the only physical evidence we still have in the DNC case. And I found a fact witness besides that, which was Taggart, which is this Marine who came out later and verified my story. That's the only physical evidence that Trump could go to, or a John Radcliffe could go to right now, or a DeGeneva could go to, or a Trey Gowdy, or whoever is the media person, Cheryl Atkinson. If you don't give them physical evidence, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. But you saw the picture of the BlackBerry. You know it exists. The only thing that I can't figure out is why the person who has the image, I have published the unpixelated image. Why would you pixelate that? Why would you pixelate that unless just to try to detract from another YouTube channel? It's the only thing I can think of. I went to Seth Rich and I walked his last steps and I looked at all the people who could have been witnesses to his last steps. We went to the hospitals. We went to both hospitals where people said he was, Howard Hospital and up at MedStar Hospital. We interviewed with task force on some of this, interviewed the different people who were nurses, doctors, all the people who had businesses along that way, people who lived in the residences along that 50-minute long walk, okay? And we just didn't find the metadata. We didn't find the metadata. And the more we looked, the more Seth Rich connected to Pioneer Energy Solutions, which was closely tied with Genie Energy, which is closely tied with Jonathan Weiner and the Blackberries again. So Seth Rich didn't have a BlackBerry. He had another Android device, I believe. But it still seemed like there seemed to be a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I was walking with a filmmaker from YouTube. We were talking about BlackBerries coming out of the Longworth office building, and there was a guy in a suit walking in front of us. And we said, man, these BlackBerries are really key. There's a second network here. Even the people who are carrying the iPhone or carrying the Android still seem to be carrying BlackBerries. DTRA must still be using BlackBerries. And the guy in front of us held up his hand and held his BlackBerry in the air. He goes, yep, I got it right here. So it seemed like something fundamentally important, some secure messaging. We had a lot of countries around the world turning off the BlackBerry service because the messages were going to India, the messages were going to servers that the people in the country couldn't control. I believe the UAE turned it off, Pakistan turned it off for a couple of times, India turned it off a couple of times because they thought that all these messages were getting intercepted. But if you were trying to get all the messages on Capitol Hill, you couldn't do any better than configure a BlackBerry because you were in control of where the servers were located, especially if your name's Imran Awan, and especially if you're sending terabytes to Pakistan. Then later we find out that he has a drug company. Imran Awan, this guy has a drug company with Rahm Emanuel in Faisalabad, and they ended up destroying the lives of 12 farmers to get this land. Now let me see, if we have WMD and it's got to be one of three things, right? It's got to be chems, nukes, or bios. To me, that says that lab is not a nuclear lab, I don't think, when you build a children's hospital. It's got to either be a chemical lab, which we never said it. I was saying it was. My research partner was saying, no, it's a bioweapons lab. We could both be right. But again, it's still where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's bioweapons and where there's chemical weapons, it deserves to be researched. It deserves to be researched. There was I next went to visit a guy who was talking about the movement of these nuclear materials. A guy named Deep Uranium seemed to know a lot about it. He was a member of the precursor to DHS, is the way he had said it to me. He knew 5 other friends that they said they had over 100 years in doing security, diplomatic security and so forth. They had a lot of time in the Navy and so forth. And he had said, hey, all this uranium that you think got sent from Russia through these agreements, START agreements and so forth, to America, to Ohio, to this little place called Piketon, Ohio, never made it. They got diverted to places like Iran, Libya, North Korea, and Ukraine, and Pakistan. None of the things you think about, this PAC-ISI is diverting all this stuff. It's the control, it's the traffic cop for all this uranium going all around. And who knows what else. Could very well be the same traffic cop for bioweapons and chemical weapons. We don't know, because these are dark blackberries. But again, you start with people who are using encrypted communications. You start with people who the House Inspector General says they have a server for nefarious purposes. You start with people who are obviously connected in with Nancy Pelosi, who say, Imran, get in here. You start with people who, when nobody can find Debbie Wasserman Schultz, even the closest associates for the DNC can't find Debbie Wasserman Schultz's password, and they have to find Imran. He's obviously a key player. And the devices he configures are going to be the telltale. The devices he configures are going to be the telltale. If this is a bioweapons attack, it's probably going to come from people who've already had enough chutzpah to do this before. It's going to come from the same cabal that did Libya, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, and the Iran nuclear deal. Wouldn't that just stand to reason? So we followed this small trucking company, and it was a totally Farsi-speaking trucking company. And we followed Imran Awan. He had this connection to this guy, Al-Attar. Still don't know if Al-Attar had a BlackBerry or not. Be a good question to ask for John Radcliffe now that he's checking in now at ODNI and finding his new office at ODNI. But again, he's communicating with somebody with known Hezbollah ties who has a direct connection. He was also Minister of Health of Iraq. Direct connection to Soleimani. Direct support from Soleimani. Direct support from our #1 terrorist that Trump just killed. Could it be that we killed this Soleimani and now this is the response that we're getting, this attack? Well, I don't know. But I know Bavari left the door open at Fort Detrick, the most pathogenic lab that we have in the United States. I know that there was a whole bunch of kids, students, Iranian students, that were being flown into Canada from Baghdad the night that they did missile attacks on our troops. And then that plane crashed. I know Trump said it was a foiled terrorist attack. So would it be so odd that they would try, if they couldn't use a chemical attack with these students, would it be so odd that they would use biological agents as a next step? Wouldn't that be a motive? Wouldn't Sina Bavari writing this WHO bioweapons playbook and him leaving the door open in August, right before the Wuhan Games, doing 4 joint ventures, wouldn't that lead you to believe that there's someone there that has a grudge and also a financial motive? Again, I don't know if Sina Bavari ever used a BlackBerry, but I know the Defense Threat Reduction Agency that moved these things around required the use of an encrypted BlackBerry. Doesn't matter what I think it should be. Doesn't matter if I think the BlackBerry's clumsy or clunky. Doesn't matter what I think about BlackBerry. If they had to use it and they were required to use it because they did a contract with RIM, which is Research in Motion, it's not what your opinion is of BlackBerry doesn't matter. It's the facts. If they used a Palm Pilot, I would be trying to find Imran's Palm Pilots. Palm Pilot's a very old PDA before the age of smartphones. I'm probably dating myself here. So I sued the DNC. I sued the DNC for that information, for the servers, for the blackberries. You remember a story about Hillary hitting and people hitting these blackberries with a hammer? Not Jared, Jason. Can't remember the guy's name. It wasn't Pagliano who configured the Apple server, but it was the Bill guy, Jason. I can't remember his name right now, but he was closely tied in with Chertoff. You see this? It's a small group here. So just to remember, who did I sue? I didn't just sue the DNC. I did sue the DNC, but I sued Huma. I sued John Podesta. I sued ARMZ, their company. Okay? Obviously, I sued Imran Awan, who avoided service. And I sued the whole spy ring. So I met with Jared Beck, who had also sued the DNC, and he saw my stuff that I had on Act Blue and all the spy ring. He was like, wow, if that comes out to be true, you've got a winner. So I consulted and played ball with all the people that were involved. So anyway, where does that leave us today? It doesn't matter what I did or somebody else did with regard to Libya anymore. Libya is buried. I'm not trying to resurrect Benghazi. What I am saying, though, is that to me it makes the most sense if you had a cabal doing an illegal action like overthrowing a country, then using the same devices to overthrow another country, then they did it again for a fourth country, a third country and a fourth country, and then they did it again for an illegal treaty or an illegal side deal with Iran, and then they did it again for 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 potential coups against Trump. I just look at it from a Bayesian statistical point of view. The next most likely coup is going to be the next ratchet up the weapons level, and the next level is bioweapons, and the next level is the same group that did this before. What would lead you to believe that it would be somebody else? If somebody took 6 shots at you 6 days in a row when you were trying to go to work, and then you saw a bullet go through your windshield on day 7, and you knew who it was, Lee Harvey Fishmonger, let's say, you would say, hey, I'll bet you Lee Harvey Fishmonger shooting at me. This isn't the first time. Each one of these acts that was done on the BlackBerry is a coup. It's a crime against the United States of America. It's a treasonous act. What part of insurance policy after Trump wins the election wouldn't fit the bill for this bioweapon? We've showed you down this river right here. We've showed you that the NATO had this handoff arrangement with DTRA, with these couriers. We've had great reporters like Dilyana lay it out, spell it out for you, that it must be these couriers. All these countries that are satellites, ex-satellites of the Soviet Union that aren't members of NATO yet, but NATO wants to bring in their fold, need the NATO couriers because they're all in the NATO partnership program to move these things around. And now we see all these NATO couriers in the bike race and watching the bike race in Wuhan during the outbreak. We have the French team. Now there's an Australian person that says he was sick. You have a Belgian guy says he was sick. The Swedish team said they were sick. The Italians said they were sick. The Chinese say it's one of 176 athletes. I have to look at who is a NATO courier, especially if they report directly to the same cabal, Stavridis, who did Libya. I don't have a choice. You have to follow the evidence. You can't choose your own evidence. If you were a driver for Stavridis and you were at the bike race in Wuhan, I have to bring that forward. I have no choice. If the other person is involved in nav war, if there's a Giuseppe involved here that was doing the interoperability with the Russians and doing the interoperability with DTRA and the U.S. Armed Forces out of NATO Act down this river here in Norfolk at the time, named Giuseppe Benassi, if the person writing the document, this war blueprint, biowarfare blueprint, is Virginia Benassi, I have to bring that forward. I'm not saying anything that's not on the WHO document. If a war criminal was the original funder, Sasakawa was the original funder of WHO, I cannot avoid telling people that. I can't suppress that. If Tedros, a war criminal who looked the other way 3 times during 3 different cholera epidemics in his own country, used chemical weapons on his own people, is the person issuing edicts to Trump about body bags, I have to report it. I cannot silence that. The blackberries are going to be as significant now as they ever were. Look at General Flynn. Look at General Flynn and his communication with Kislyak. People said I made up the communication. When I went to the ambassador's residence, I made up the communication that it was a blackberry. Now we're finding out through these Grinnell disclosures that, oh yes, it was a blackberry. General Flynn's own defense team, Sidney Powell, said that they wanted the 2 blackberries between Mifsud and General Flynn. Okay, so all the data that you're getting now 3 years later is confirming our story and confirming the importance of the blackberries. I'm not talking about a future attack. I don't know what's going to be important for a future attack, but I know that the evidence that's coming forward now that's so important, that's in front of Trump right now and his new ODNI chief, was done on blackberries, and the cabal and the network was done on blackberries. The hand that moved the chess pieces, we even did a show on this with Halper, the hand that moved the chess pieces, the chems, the nukes, the bios, that's DTRA's hand. In that hand to communicate to everyone else is the blackberry. You have no choice. You have no choice here. You can't pick the brand that you like the most because you like Apple. You have to go with what was being used at the time of the person when they committed the crime. Okay, that's all we're doing here is looking at how did the criminals communicate with each other when they were doing these treasonous acts. It seems rather simple, and I don't understand why that would be attacked, and I don't understand why you'd pixelate it, to be honest.